All right. I'm gonna give it a few minutes just to kind of let it soak in and see if anybody jumps on. Give everybody a couple minutes to jump on. That's gonna jump on tonight. But super excited about our Friday night live sessions. For those of you that are new to the channel, we do these on Friday evenings at 10 p.m. Uh, Oftentimes, like tonight, I have a topic that I will get into and go over a little bit, and then we will just kind of you know answer any questions that come in, whether it be about the topic or about data engineering in general. Really, just here to do some Q&A and give everybody an opportunity to jump on and ask questions. So, for tonight's live session, I have a special for you. I am going to talk about a little bit about something I did with ChatGPT, a little bit about something that Jess did on LinkedIn that leads into this. But let me jump into it. So, for those of you that are jumping on, whether you are here live or whether you are watching this afterwards as a recording, how many of you have ever broken something in production? Uh, you know, be honest. We've all done it. We've all been there. Um, there's no shame here because tonight we're going to be talking about some rookie mistakes that every data engineer makes, and uh, let me tell you, the we're going to talk about some of the funny ones, some of the frustrating ones, and hopefully you'll learn to laugh about it if you're not laughing about it now. Uh, So the Chat GPT part and the Jess Ramos part. For those of you that don't know who Jess Ramos is, she's a she's pretty popular on LinkedIn and some of the other social media platforms for data analytics, and she's awesome. If you haven't seen her, go and check her out. I'll be sure to put her her LinkedIn information in the down in the comments. But she's great, and she posted something earlier on LinkedIn. I thought I'd kind of steal it from her a little bit, but she posted the a roast of data analysts. Asked ChatGPT to do a roast of data analysts. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do this for fresher data engineers. So I asked ChatGPT to roast fresher data engineers, and it did not disappoint. It gave a really great list of a handful of things that we all have done at some point in our careers, particularly early on, because you just don't know better. So we're going to get into that and those what those pitfalls are, and I'm also going to cover how to avoid them. Right? Uh, we'll talk about it, we'll laugh about it, and then we will talk about how you could see it coming, and so that you could avoid it and not fall into those same kind of pitfalls. Real quick, I'm just grabbing Jess's profile just so that you take a look if you're interested. Um, but yeah, Jess is great, and always has great information about data analytics that she posts. She has some training out there as well. But yeah, roast on data engineers. So again, roasting some fresher data engineers with some common pitfalls. And again, like I said, we've all fallen into these. So if you have already fallen into these things, don't feel bad. Um, we've all hit these. For those of you that haven't been here before, I'm Chris Gamble, and I've been in data engineering and data analytics for the last 25 years. I've really seen so many things. I've seen rookie mistakes. I've fallen into those rookie mistakes early on. Really, some major fails that have been very impactful. I've seen um, so many things in 25 years that people do, and a whole lot of lessons that I learned personally, um, whether it be from my own mistakes or watching other people make mistakes. um, Mistakes are our biggest teacher, right? If you're not making mistakes, you're not doing a whole lot of anything. You're not learning, and you're not growing. So go out there, make mistakes. There's nothing wrong with it. try not to delete a table out of production, which is one of the things that we'll get into. Um, so tonight, I really want to talk about some of these common mistakes that we make when we're starting out. We're gonna, like I said, we're gonna laugh, we might cry, and again, I'm gonna give you some practical tips on how to avoid them. So let's dive in. And like always, stop me if you have any questions, ideas, anything that you want to add. Stop me and let me know. I'm super interested in hearing what maybe some common pitfalls that you've fallen into along your course, along your journey. So let's start roasting. Here is a class of really some classic rookie mistakes that occur. And if you're guilty of any of these, let me know down in the down in the chat. Love to hear from you. Again, I've fallen into many of these, especially early on in my career, and I've seen a lot of people do that too. So no judgment tonight. This is always a judgment-free zone. There are no dumb questions, no dumb comments. So number one thing, fresher data engineers, especially fresh out of college or fresh out of some boot camp, walk in and they're like, I have mastered SQL. I know it all, right? Well, that's all good and well until your query returns some Cartesian join and you have millions or even tens of millions of records that return and it freezes up the database, or nothing returns because it's just cranking for hours and hours and hours, and you've hosted up some production database, some production system somewhere. This true story, I once had a data engineer on my team that she did this. She ran a query. She was just trying to get some information out somebody asked her for, and she ran a query and it had been spinning for hours and hours, and ended up being, it was a Cartesian join, and it ran up a huge Snowflake bill. It ran up like a $10,000 Snowflake bill from that one query, because we didn't catch it for like a whole day. I mean, it was ridiculous. So be careful with Cartesian joins. Make sure that that's something that is in the SQL interview question, the SQL join video that I just did. If you haven't checked that out yet, be sure you go check that out. But it happens. It happens to the best of us. The important thing is that, especially when you're running a query that is not, you've not run before, or you're doing ad hoc, that you watch it, you keep an eye on it, make sure that it's not going to do that, so you can kill it if you need to. But yeah, we'll get into more more how to avoid these, or how to correct them even, here in a minute. So the next thing is that again, ChatGPT came up with these items to roast fresher data engineers. Is I prefer Python over SQL, and that's all great and well. Python is great, but if you're in pipeline involves manually debugging a 5 GB CSV because you skipped some proper testing, you're going to regret that you don't have that foundation of SQL, right? Yeah, that you didn't have that SQL to do those tests and do those evaluations to check first. So master SQL foundations first before you move into Python. I preach this all the time. It is on my data engineer honeycomb map, the honeycomb of traits that is on my website. Focus on your SQL basics first, and then you can move on to Python. Honestly, doing it that way will make learning Python so much easier anyways. So, Python will really feel just native to you after you've learned SQL really well first. So next one, I can build a data warehouse. Fresher data engineers, again, out of college, out of a boot camp, they're like, I could go out and build my own data warehouse. I could walk into a job and I could build a whole data warehouse, no problem. That's all good and well until you start getting this waterfall of asks, and all of a sudden you're scrambling and you're naming things like final v4 1010 2024 underscore. I promise it's my last final of a table name or of a SQL script. And, you look back at it 6 months later and you're like, I don't know what any of this is. So you're not going to get far unless you have really again, this is my pro tip here is going to be make sure that you have good, solid naming conventions, um, and before you start building your data warehouse. Uh, hey, welcome. Thanks. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Um, so so if you build a data warehouse, make sure that you have thought through and really documented your architecture before you jumped into building. That is you'd be surprised how many people jump right into, hey, I could do this. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to start messing with it. And they don't have any of the documentation for the naming conventions, don't have any documentation for diagrams, for so all the diagrams of how things are going to relate to each other and things like that. Um, so important to cover those things before you just jump in and start working. So for those of you that are just joining, we're going over some fresher data engineering uh, pitfalls and mistakes, rookie mistakes that people make. And I got this list from asking ChatGPT to roast fresher data engineers, um, and thought it would be interesting to go over tonight. So uh, let me know where you're from, and let me know that you're here. Say hi. Love to hear from everybody. And if you have any pitfalls that you've made early on in your career or as you started out, let me know in the comments. And I'd love to talk about those as well. And again, along with these, I'm going to talk through kind of how to avoid these as you move through your career. Something that we all hear from software engineers and from data engineers, it works fine on my machine. Well, yeah, of course it does, because that's the environment that you built it on. Um, everything runs great on your machine until you run it on production somewhere with 10 million rows and it just doesn't scale well, or there's something that's on your machine locally that's not in production. And it never goes perfect. Nothing ever goes perfect. And if it does, again, you're not learning, you're not doing stuff new. So always be sure that you load test things. Um, if you can, as best you can, when you're moving from a test environment to a production environment, or from a non-prod to a production environment, be sure that you're testing things. Load test them. Make sure that they work well at scale. That that 100 rows, or that 10,000 rows, or even that 100,000 rows that you're feeding into a procedure or a pipeline that might work well on locally on your computer, or even again with just that 100,000 rows, is it going to do as well when it scales to a million rows, or when you have files that are coming in every 10 seconds and you're processing those files? So make sure that you load test things as well as you can. All right, this is the last one. Why do we even need indexes? I've seen a lot of fresher data engineers, especially ones that maybe have absolutely no previous real life work experience. Again, because they're not dealing with millions of records. When you're dealing with databases and especially databases that are pristine and have maybe 100,000 records, or even less than really 10 million records. Um, Again, indexes start becoming more important. You might not see the performance issues at under a million records or even under 10 million records, but you start hitting those thresholds and all of a sudden things start cranking along at 45 minutes and you're like, why is that query still running? Well, because you missed an index somewhere. So indexing is really one of those things that uh, you find are very important as you move through your career. Um, all right, so uh, I've laughed. I've had some laughs, and again, this is I've just put Jess Ramos's LinkedIn on here. Again, if you've not checked her out, she's a great data analyst, trainer, and she posts a ton of stuff on um, on LinkedIn and on Instagram, and she's awesome. But she's really cool. She posts a lot of interesting and funny stuff. So, all right. So that is we've had some laughs. Let's talk about some of these. Let me know in the comments, any of your thoughts on all these things, and maybe some that I missed, some big holes that maybe you found in your education or your training that uh, that has really bitten you as you've moved into a career. Um, Materialized views, honestly, that's a great question. I you hear that material, you learn that in school, and honestly, materialized views don't come up a lot from a data engineering perspective. From an analyst perspective, it comes up more often. From a data engineering perspective, you know, a lot of our work is doing transformation, getting the raw data, doing transformations, and then putting it into a staging table and then into a production table. Um, and then maybe if we're, for those of us that are working on a medallion model, we might be taking those kind of that bronze level data and moving it into silver and gold and kind of aggregating along the way. But not a whole lot, not a whole lot, honestly. Uh, CTEs we use a lot. Temp tables uh, are used sometimes. Um, but really materialized views just not a lot. Great question. Thank you. All right. So here's some further things to keep in mind as you move through your career, as you get into things. You're going to get a lot of requests that somebody's like, hey, I need this data really quick. I just need it once, no big deal. I promise you that one time ask is never actually a one time ask. Everything is going to turn into something that they come back to you in a few weeks and they're like, hey, that thing that I asked you for a few weeks ago, hey, I need it again. So always treat every ask like it's going to come up, like it's going to be a recurring data set model report that somebody's going to need. Um, I promise you that somebody, either that person or somebody else, is going to come back and they're going to need it again because they've shown it to somebody and that person's like, oh, hey, can you get that data again? And they're like, oh yeah, I'll just ask Chris. And they think you're magic anyways. And so they'll just turn around and ask. Um, so, try to write some clean, reusable code that will continue to scale and be dynamic, right? Make sure that you're not hard coding a bunch of stuff in so that when somebody asks you 3 weeks from now, hey, can you run the last week? You don't have to do a whole lot of work to get that last 7 days. Um, Naming conventions. I can't harp on really some standardized naming conventions and just some data, some standards, right? Documenting your standards, just in general. Naming conventions really can be a form of art. um, Descriptive names really are going to save you time down the line. um, there, a table that's called sales 2024 Q1 is way better than temp sales, right? Or Dave's table or something like that, right? No offense to Dave or anybody like that, but you'll get those requests that, again, people are like, hey, I just need it once, and it's never once. Be sure that you name your tables really descriptively, so that when you have to go back to it, then, and your views too, right? Um, when you create views in your database and your data warehouse, make sure that you are using really descriptive names so that 6 months, a year from now, when you look back at it, you know what it was. All right. So backups are your best friend. One of the biggest things, sorry, one of the biggest things that you're going to find in your data engineering career are that backups are your best friend. Um, you know, in one of the jobs that I had, they had a great way of handling any change to a foundation table. And that is that every time they made a change to the foundation table, they created a backup. every time, no matter what. If they added a column, if they change, um, if they removed a column, if they changed the name of a column, anytime they made a change, first thing they did was make a copy of that table in a rollback schema, and then they made the change to the foundation table, and then they reloaded the foundation table from the backup table, right? They kept that backup table for 6 months, because if 3 months from now, 4 months from now, somebody needs that data from that column that you just got rid of, then that you still got it, right? So that it's important to keep those scripts and to keep those tables and that data, so that if you need it, and I would even recommend keeping it 14 months. Um, yeah, I'll get into to some naming conventions here in a second, uh, JV. Um, but yeah, having that backup table really will save your ass sometimes as you get into things. Um, because and I would recommend keeping it more than 6 months. I would recommend keeping things about 14 months, because some things only come up once a year, right? There are some asks and some reporting that people only ask for once a year. So I would recommend about 14 months. After that, you could start purging, start rolling off some of your backup stuff. Um, so let's talk about table naming real quick here. I have a convention for table naming. It's something that I've seen and something that I've enforced over time. And it one thing that you see, right, a lot is um, VW at the beginning of views, right? So you'll have VW and then underscore. And I'm a fan of underscores. Some teams that you go to, some companies that you go to, may be a fan of the proper case, right? Proper casing. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as camel case, where you capitalize the first letter of each word. Um, you run into issues with when there's like acronyms and stuff with that. So my preference is always using underscores. And so that's underscores is something that is important to, put into your standards. Again, if creating that standard stock is important. Um, Another thing is that you start your table so that, like, for instance, for tables, sometimes you'll see things with a prefix of TBL for table, right? So you'll see TBL and then underscore. And then my next thing with my standards is whatever program, whatever system that you're pulling that data from, that's the next piece. So that when you're looking at your database, it kind of groups everything from that system together. And you could use schemas for that too. Sometimes you'll see schemas used for that, so that it breaks it apart that way. Um, but that doesn't help you when you're doing things in a staging schema, right? So you'll see staging as your schema, dot TBL underscore, and then like um, maybe it's square. Maybe you're pulling data from square, right? And so you'll see underscore and then SQ, or maybe square spelled out. Again, something to put into your standard stock, depending on which direction that you want to go. And then you could put a little bit more description, whether it's maybe from a finance object, or maybe it's the transaction object, or whatever that object is. And then if you're breaking things up by, maybe you're breaking things up by department or whatever the case may be, then you put more description, and again, separating things out with underscores. But that's kind of the method that I usually follow, is TBL or VW for view or table. PR for procedure, things like that. Um, and then you'll do underscore, the name of the system, or the name of you know, the org that you're pulling data from. So again, if it's Square, or if it's HubSpot, or if it is, um, my brain's going blank. I'm trying to think of Salesforce. Then you have, that designation. Again, it helps to group things together, especially when you have a staging schema, to have all your staging tables together when you're looking down through there. Uh, Aside from that, make sure that you're using schemas appropriately, and use create schemas as needed for those systems as well. Um, or I see a lot of times domains use domains for your schemas. Like HR, you'll see an HR schema for all your HR objects because systems come and go. So you have to be careful with that. Salesforce, probably if your company's using Salesforce, it's not going to go anywhere. So you're pretty safe there. But like telephony systems can change over time. Um, and so the data that you use for your telephony system or even your HRIS system um, can change over time. And so you don't want to name things necessarily in your production environments specific to the system. You could do it in stage. Like I said, you do it in staging. But aside from that, probably use domain nomenclature um, for your production stuff. Hopefully that answers your question, JV. Great questions. All right. So, like I said, naming conventions form art. We talked through some of that. Backups are your best friend. Staging isn't production. Do not allow your analysts, do not yourself use and create views based on your staging tables that you're going to use in some type of production reporting. Staging is not your production data. Staging is there to stage your data. You're bringing it in from the source, you're putting it into staging, you're cleaning it up, you're maybe rearranging things, you're casting different variables the way that they need to be cast. Staging is not production. Please, please, please do not use your staging tables as production data. Hey, Phil. Hi from New Zealand. I have basic knowledge of SQL, but need to build my first reporting replica with business logic rules. That is exciting. That's an exciting, that's a big first project. That's awesome. Look, let me know what questions and stuff you have about that. I'm happy to talk through that, Phil. Welcome. Glad you're here. Definitely for you, staging is not production. All right, so now it's your turn. We've got a handful of people here. Let me know, have you ever made some of these mistakes? And maybe I've missed one that I didn't mention that resonates with you. Yeah, let's take a quick poll for those of you that are still here. Which mistake sounds the most familiar? Cartesian joins, messy naming conventions, or forgetting indexes? Let me know if any of those resonate with you down in the chat. Again, if you're watching this on a recording afterwards, feel free to put it in the discussion chat as well, or in the comments down below as well. And love to hear from you. All right. So this is usually the point. Again, I usually take up the first 30 minutes or so with some type of comment, some type of discussion on some topic that I've come up with. So this was tonight's. I'll let you know that I'm still working on my AI agent video. I really want to do a video on creating a AI agent for data engineering, and I'd like to show it off live during one of these sessions, but I need to get it together. This week ended up being kind of busy. Incorrect joins are a big one. That's a big one, and that's one that incorrect joins can really bite you. I can't tell you how many, especially beginning junior level data engineers, cannot tell you how many times I've seen them really only use left joins. Like that's all that they use. They got so used to losing data because they did an inner join that they just use a left join for everything. and that kills performance in the long run. In the long run, so hey, service. Um, so that's the incorrect joins are a big one. It, yeah, left joins. I see a lot. Accidentally creating some Cartesian product because they missed part of the join criteria. So all of a sudden, instead of getting 10,000 rows, they get 100,000 rows, and they're like, "What the heck just happened? Everything's duplicating." Um, so yeah, incorrect joins and inaccurate join criteria um, are gonna kill you um, in the long run. So yeah, absolutely. Um, very cool. Any questions at all? Let me know in the chat. Happy to talk through things. Again, the first about 30 minutes, usually about whatever topic it is that we've discussed, and then usually by the last 30 minutes, people start rolling in and start having some pretty good questions, and we usually have some pretty good conversation. So we usually get pretty into the weeds sometimes, but that's what we're here for on Friday nights. Uh, Sometimes we get into how do I apply for things? What's my recommendation? We talk a lot about how to network and who to reach out to when you're applying for jobs, things like that. But as we're waiting for questions, keep in mind that again, if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning. Mistakes are really just part of the process. Whether software engineers will tell you this too, in data engineering, in any type of programming job, errors are part of it. That's why imposter syndrome is such a big thing in tech, because the first day of a new project, and you're starting to pull stuff in, and you're trying to create something, and you're running it, and you get an error, and you go in and you correct that, and you run it again, and you get a different error, or maybe you get the same error. And the key thing here is learning how to kind of roll with those punches, right? And not let it get you frustrated and down, not get so close to the problem that you can't see the forest for the trees, and figuring out and learning how to read some of those very cryptic error messages and how to troubleshoot those, whether it be in SQL or Python or within an ETL tool, how to take those errors and learn from them and quickly adjust and then retry. I mean, that's the big thing here. Yeah, none of us starts perfect. None of us ends perfect. Even the best data engineers, again, mess up from time to time. We all Google something every day, um, whether it be syntax because we bounced from Oracle to SQL Server or vice versa, and the syntax is slightly different for a function, and we've forgotten what order to put the date diff function in when we're filling it out, or uh, or some Python library that we use once in a blue moon, and we've got to go out and figure out, which of the, functions it is that I need from this, or whatever the case may be. We all Google something every day. Um, so uh, let's see, Phil. Phil, interested in nulls. My database is full of holes. Yeah, assets represented can be 100 years old. Ooh. Any thoughts on how to handle nulls? So that's a big question. That's so many ways to handle nulls. One, um, you can. Um, this is a big thing. Handling nulls in your data, you can either try to get the information from somewhere else, right? If it is something that you could get from another data set that you could somehow aggregate or enhance from another data set that you can maybe join and then pull that in, and so that you could fill in some of those holes. Um, if it is a some type of normalized value that's going to that you could easily kind of guesstimate, then maybe you could do that. But really, that starts throwing off all kinds of stuff. depending on the data set, there could be some regulations around that. It could throw off some reporting. So you try not to do that, but that is one of the methods, is um, to fill it in with like a median or an average. But really, you don't want to do that. Generally, you'll for any type of analysis afterwards, you see a lot of people exclude those records if they don't have enough um, legitimate data for that record. Then you see people, that's a common method, is to not use those records in your analysis. um, but the best way is try to find the data somewhere. Absolute best way is try to find the data from another data set and be able to enhance your original data set, because you were able to do some research and like work and pull that data in from another data set and supplement it that way. But just be sure that you're doing a lot of testing and checking as you're going through that. um, what kind of data, I know assets represented could be 100 years old, but are you talking like date values? Are you talking like numeric values? Are they string values, like maybe cities, or or some type of string values that way? Um, but what type of values are your holes? Uh, Numeric values are the hardest, because you don't want to supplement it with like a median or an average, because again, it'll throw off numbers down the line, reporting down the line, and will cause issues. Sometimes it's best to just leave it as nulls, and sometimes those nulls are legitimate. Sometimes the data wasn't available at the time, and um, and that's why it's not there, because that field didn't exist at the time. And in those cases, you have to try to supplement it from somewhere else, if that's a possibility. And sometimes it takes a lot of legwork to find that. That's an awesome question. Let's see. Materials. Challenge is we're facing. Challenge we're facing is we want to change a non-mandatory field to be a non-nullable field. Yeah. So construction. Or I'm assuming construction based on that. Um, some type of construction. Yeah, it's nullable. Um, yeah, so going forward, you'll have the data, right? That's one of the things, is the data just didn't exist prior to, and so there's probably not any way to get that. You can try to, again, ask around, ask your um, stakeholders, ask the people that you're doing that's going to be the end users for the data, and see if it's a possibility that you can either find an expert, find somebody that does this like day in, day out for their living, and try to say, okay, based on this type of project, based on this type of situation, what would generally be the subpavement data, and try to supplement it that way. Again, try to use the data that you have, and figure out, okay, based on these types of situations, what are the materials that would fit into it based on the data that we do have. And if the stakeholders are okay with you supplementing that data that way, then that's a possibility. That's something that I've seen done before too, is supplementing based on best guess, based on the data that you do have. Again, just be careful when you do that, and make sure with the stakeholders and like I said, your end users, that they're okay um, with you doing that. I don't have any job experience, and I have one internship as a data analyst. Should I get deeper into data engineering, or should I just get a job as a DA? Um, so it kind of a double-edged sword there, but I would recommend both. I know this might sound crazy, but I would recommend both here. I would recommend getting that job as a DA, getting that job as a data analyst, learning on the job, and then one, networking and getting to know your data engineering group, right? Because as a data analyst, you're probably working pretty closely with your data engineering group, anyways. So go out there, talk to your data engineering group, talk to your data engineer leaders, and make it known that you're interested in moving that direction. And a lot of times they're willing to help you move in that direction, whether it be via some side projects. Maybe they do have a bunch of tech debt. Promise you that they have a bunch of tech debt that they could probably use the help with. So if you have time within your own role and can help out with some of their tech debt, then that's a possibility. And then that will help you to have some practical experience, help you network, and help you move into that data engineering role as you move through your career. Um, so I would recommend both. Get the job as a DA, use that to kind of network and get more experience. You'll get further foundation in SQL, probably get some exposure to the business, right? As a DA, you have more exposure. You're a little bit closer to the business than the engineers are. And some of the best data engineers are the ones that have that business, have that foundational understanding of how the business works. And really helps you with your career as you move forward and continue to learn data engineering. Um, I promise you, even in the analyst role, having those data engineering skills will pay off in the end, um, in a lot of ways, because the data engineering team is probably overwhelmed. And if you have some data engineering skills, then maybe one, you could help out, and maybe also you can kind of do things sneakily on the side, um, to help your analyst team out so that you could get things done without telling the data engineers. I've seen that done in plenty of jobs. Um, but it'll help you there too. Going back to Phil's question here, we're debating whether to insert guest data. Yeah, and if we do that, whether we need a flag to say it was. I 100% would use the flag. Uh, if you creating that flag so that you can identify, okay, this is estimated and this is actual. And I would just create that flag as a bit, not even as a boolean, right? I would make it as a bit so that it takes up very little space. It's a 0 or a 1. It's easy to query on, and that would be my recommendation there. Yeah, absolutely. um yeah, and absolutely. Then switch to a data engineering job after 1 or 2 years as a data analyst. Um, I see a lot of people do that. I have I have a friend that she is a analyst now, and she's working towards becoming a data engineer. And she did the same thing that I said. She networked. She got to know our data engineering team for the company that I was at there, and um, she helped out sometimes to creating procedures. She was the best in her department with SQL, and really, she was awesome. So, um, yeah, it gives you the networking skills, gives you the opportunity to move up into that data engineer role. Um, and look, Phil agrees. And I'd say that if for those of you that are in data engineering, you see this. This is a common path that you roll into a data analyst role, and then you roll into a data engineering role afterwards. Um, the more you understand the business, the better at DA you could be. And it feels primarily a business analyst. Um, and sometimes that's the path. Sometimes any foot that you could get in the door at a company to get, especially as a beginner, as a fresher, any foot that you get in the door, whether it be business analyst, data analyst, I've even seen project managers, right? You get in the door as a project manager is handling so much data day in, day out. Having some of those SQL, having some of those analyst skills really help you along. And I've seen project managers turn into data analysts, which later turn into even data architects. Um, And so that is a potential path. Personally, I've hired several. When I was at AT&T, I hired some people that were from the finance group that were not data analysts or data engineers previously, um, but they were in our finance teams, and finance people have some amazing skills when it comes to managing data, researching errors, researching issues, um, and and really helping out. So um, yeah, so yeah, very cool. Great conversation, great questions tonight, guys. Let me know down in the chat what other questions you may have. Uh, like I said, earlier we covered some common pitfalls, um, and like I said, often the second half of these videos we get into these type of career questions of how do I get in, how do I get a foot in the door. So great conversation tonight, guys. Let me know in the comments what other questions you may have about data engineering, um, or about data in general. And like I said, I've been doing this for 25 years, so I've seen a lot. You know, started out with DTS packages and crystal reports and being just the data guy. Um, before we even had these data engineering uh, actual titles. So a lot of us that have been around for a while, we were just the data person. We did all the things. Uh, so yeah, let me know. Let me know down in the comments what you think, what other questions you may have. Um, trying to look at my notes here. Fancy's back. Yay, Fancy. I heard you mention becoming data analyst first because company might not. Yes. Um, junior data engineer role. Yes, there is such a thing as a junior data engineer role. Um, I've only seen it once. Uh, uh, there's not a lot of them. For kind of for the reason Fancy we talked about before is companies want you to have a better understanding of data and SQL and um, kind of what the impacts of what you're doing are before they kind of give you those reins on manipulating, because that's what you're doing. You're manipulating data, and that data is being fed to oftentimes C-suite people that are making major business decisions off that data. Um, there are some junior data engineer roles out there, and they are usually few and far between. Um, so much of that work is either contracted out or done through some type of consulting groups overseas, at least from a US perspective overseas. Um, and and so because of that, there's not a whole lot of like W-2 full-time work for junior data engineers, just not. The benefits of a DA start, but what if you don't want to waste time and you have the skills? Um, if you don't want to waste the time and you have the skills, uh, I like Phil. I'm going to get to Phil's next question here in a second because it is an awesome question. But let me address Fancy here first, because Fancy, for those of you that are newer to the group, Fancy has been here like from the beginning. So Fancy, I appreciate always every time that you're here. Thank you so much. But if you don't want to waste time and you have the skills, I would. If you are struggling, first of all, if you have the skills and you can demonstrate that you have those skills and you feel confident that you could do it in an interview setting, um, apply for the jobs. Go out there and apply for the data engineering jobs that aren't necessarily a junior data engineer, and let them tell you. First of all, I would always recommend, if you look at a job rec and you fit 60% of it, apply for it. Let them tell you no. Let them tell you we're looking for somebody with more experience. Um, don't, otherwise you're just shooting yourself in the foot. That being said, if you're having a hard time even getting into those interviews because you don't have that practical knowledge on your resume, um, I would do two things. Um, and Gene, if you're out there, you've heard this before, so I apologize. But and if any of my mentees are out there, you've heard me say this before. But go out. Small businesses are really an underserved part, a piece of data engineering. Um, so I would recommend going out to small businesses, offering your skills, offering to help them out to do a project, to integrate all of their data from all their systems into one place, to try to make their lives easier and try to get that type of experience under your belt that you could put on a resume, that you could start to build that portfolio. And then if that doesn't work, there's always things like freelancer.com or Upwork that you could try to bid on projects for. Again, you're kind of doing that work for next to nothing sometimes, but you're really looking for that uh, that kind of resume boost anyways. So you're not looking for necessarily the financial gain. You're looking for um, the resume boost so that you could get to having a full-time career as a data engineer and jump right into it. Hopefully that helps. That would be my recommendation. Hopefully that helps, Fancy. All right, Phil. Yeah, and I said a second ago, I really was excited about this question. How do you get your project to the top of the queue in a huge bureaucratic organization? Um, Business case, IT security, team blockers, etc. That's a big one. That's a hard one. If you have a project that you really want to do and you want it to move to the top of the queue, you have to. Especially if it's a bureaucratic thing, identify what the business value is going to be for that project. What is your sale? Because they could care less. Whoever you're trying to sell it to, whether it be C suite or your boss's boss, whoever that is, you need to identify what is the business value for this project. Is it decreased in man hours? Is it an estimated increase in sales? Is it you're cutting expenses somewhere because you're identifying different gaps? Whatever that case may be, quantify it as much as you can. Put it into your ticket, put it into your all of your scrum notes and everything, and build your business case. Um, if you have IT security team blockers, then your your best bet is to probably have had a friend that's in that in your IT security group that you could talk to and try to figure out how you get around it. If you don't have a friend in IT security, probably a good idea in your company to go ahead and build those some of those relationships so that they can help you quickly move through roadblocks in the future. I would always recommend finding somebody on your security team that you kind of buddy. Not that they're going to do you favors necessarily, but that it, greasing the wheels helps. It does. That's the reality of corporations and big business. Um, having those conversations so that you're really building trust, right? You're building trust. You're building networking. Um, and yeah, building those relationships not just within your team but across disciplines is really key. um yeah, absolutely. So that's what I would recommend as far as blockers from things like security. um Try to build those relationships so that you could talk to them easily. And one, they trust you a little bit more. And so they trust that you're going to be able to handle that security. And so that they could tell you how to work around the system or how to work through the system. Um, those are the ways to get through that. The other way to get through to the top of the queue in a huge bureaucratic organization is to have already made some of those relationships with some of the leaders or some of the people that you see moving up quickly through the ranks, and get them to understand that you're good at what you do and that help them to understand that you know what you're doing, and so that they trust you. And that will not only help you when you're trying to get your project to the top of the list, but it will help you when you're looking to move up in your career as well. Great questions. Thank you all so much for jumping on and uh, and interacting tonight. I'm incredibly for those of you that again that are newer. We do this at 10 o'clock on Friday nights, usually for about an hour. Sometimes it runs over. Sometimes it runs for an hour and a half. Even had one run 2 hours, but really here to answer your questions like this. I love having these conversations. Um, I've been in the business for 25 years. I have been a director of data and analytics. I've been a data analyst. I've been a data engineer for most of my career. I've been data in data engineering, and probably honestly a third of my career doing analyst and engineering at the same time. Early in my career, I was just the data guy, and so probably the first 10ish years I was just the data guy. So I've done some consulting earlier in my career. I did a few years doing website database consulting. That was back when Cold Fusion was a big thing. Cold Fusion, the Adobe technology, not Cold Fusion, like a weapon or energy. So yeah. Let me know what questions you have in the chat. Happy to continue these conversations. Phil, welcome. Everybody that's new, welcome. Fancy, excited to see you back. Let me know what data engineering questions you have down in the chat. I'm going to look through my notes here and see if there's anything else I wanted to cover tonight. But yeah, I'm always grateful when you all join me on Friday nights. I appreciate it. I love these conversations. Love getting to know everybody, and a lot of people come back. So that's always exciting. A big thing that I love to hear from you all is tell me what you need to learn. What do you need me to show you in other videos? What is something that really you think will help you further your career, that I could help you with. So I really, that's important to me to make sure that I'm serving you all, because I'm doing this to help other people. That's after 25 years, I really wanted to give back to a profession that has meant so much to me, and has done so much for me over the years. I just realized that my wife's coffee cup is in the background here. It says Mama Claus. So let's see. Like I said, just going through my notes, seeing if there's anything else I want to cover. Let me know in the comments if you have any other questions. And we'll try to wrap it up here in the next few minutes. We're right about the top of the hour. I feel like there was something else that I wanted to mention while I was here, and I don't remember what it is. So I will say that next week, I think we're going to talk about data modeling, and why it's so important as your data scales, as your business scales. If I don't get the AI agent stuff up and running before then, if I could get my AI agent up and running before then, I wanna go through that next week. But I'll try to let everybody know in the community section on the page on the channel if which way that I end up going. All right, Phil, good luck. Yeah, data model. Okay, data modeling might be what it is next week then. Bill, again, thanks for joining. Thanks for talking to me tonight. I appreciate it. Um, I will say that in the next few weeks, I am. Uh, we had Nathan was here last week. Going to try to hook up with him over the next month or so to do an interview with him, to talking with him, and I have um, another person from. Um, his name's from a company called Capstorm. Capstorm is a company that has a tool. Sorry, I flipped over. I'm trying to get back to my page. Capstorm, for those of you that don't know, is a company that has a tool that they migrate Salesforce data into your data warehouse. Their tool does a full replication. You could do incremental replications. I've used it before. It's an awesome tool. I'm not getting any money for selling this or anything, but I really enjoy Capstorm, and over the years has I've built a relationship with some of the people that work there, and I have I have Drew that will be joining us probably in the next month or so to talk about a little bit about Capstorm and the benefits of having a tool to do that type of work as opposed to having a pipeline that's doing that. Maybe you're using the Salesforce APIs, or maybe maybe you're using something like ADF or Synapse or Fabric or um, Glue or something to want to use one of their native connectors to connect to Salesforce and import data. And one of the exciting things that they have now is that, and one of the cool things that really efficiently Capstorm does is pulls the Salesforce data, push it into multiple databases. So if you have, maybe like I had at one point, a Postgres database that lived in AWS that I needed the Salesforce data in, and I had a Snowflake instance that I needed the data in, and I was putting it into Postgres, and then I had Python scripts that were in Docker containers in AWS that was moving that data into Snowflake. Um, Again, the cool thing is that they just came out with a Snowflake connector for Capstorm, and so I'm super excited about that. I'm looking at kind of the documentation on that tool, and want to share it with you all too, and kind of talk through things like that. We'll do a session soon on tools like that, because there are other tools out there that are like that too. There's one called Stitch that does a great job of pulling data from various sources like HubSpot and Google Analytics and LinkedIn ads and a lot of marketing stuff. Stitch has a lot of marketing connectors in it, but we'll pull a lot of data from those different data sets, different data sources, and push that data into whatever your endpoint is, whether it be Snowflake or Delta Lake or an ADLS container or a S3 bucket. Stitch really does a great job of doing that as well. Capstorm, very specialized for Salesforce, and that type of migration not migration, but data transfer from Salesforce into your data warehouse. There's a handful of tools out there like that I've used over the years that really do a fantastic job. Very specialized in what their connectors are, but really do a fantastic job. Um, and I'll say that, like, for there's some things like NetSuite, right, that sometimes could be difficult, and ServiceNow, right? There's some things out there like those things that are can be a pain to pull data from. Really can be a challenge, especially if there is some custom integration and some custom tables and objects that have been created. Um, there are tools like Boomi. Boomi does a great job with ServiceNow, or not ServiceNow, but NetSuite, and there's a NetSuite connector now in ADF too. So there's that. But great tools out there. We'll be covering those in the next few weeks. I'm working to connect with Drew on a time and a day that would be good for him to do a session, and excited to have him on. So again, wrapping it up here, a little bit past the hour. If you have any final questions, let me know in the chat. If you don't, I'm so excited, really, for all the chats that we have tonight. Uh, I really do love these sessions. We had a lot of great conversations tonight. Have a lot of great conversations every Friday night, and I hope that you come back again next Friday. And if there aren't any other final things, then I will wish you a great week, and I will see you on the flip side. Thank you all.